This episode is an ESL listening practice for intermediate learners. You will hear a natural conversation with clear pronunciation and everyday English. No tests, no pressure, just listening. Let's start.
Hello and welcome to ESL Listening Practice. I am so excited for the conversation we are going to have today.
It's great to be here.
This is one of those topics that I think practically every single person listening can, relate to, especially if you've reached that point in your English journey where you feel pretty good about your skills in general, but maybe work is a completely different story.
You are absolutely right. This is a huge milestone for learners, and it's often a point of, a lot of anxiety.
Right.
We're talking about that specific transition from being a general English speaker, someone who can travel, make friends, understand movies, to becoming a professional English speaker. It just feels like a massive leap for so many people.
Exactly. And I want to speak directly to you, the listener, for a second. I want to try and paint a picture of where you likely are right now.
Yeah, let's do that.
You're probably at what we call a B2 level. You're intermediate, maybe upper intermediate. You can go on vacation to London or New York. You can order your food, chat with a taxi driver, maybe even make a joke.
The social stuff is fine.
The social stuff is fine. You watch Netflix, maybe without subtitles sometimes. You feel fluent in life.
Right. The comfort zone is there. You have the mechanics down. You can express yourself when the stakes are, pretty low.
But then Monday morning hits. You walk into the office, or maybe you log on to Zoom.
The professional context.
And you have to write an email to a client, or you have to give a status update in a meeting. And suddenly, all that confidence it evaporates.
Like it was never there.
You freeze. You worry that you sound like a child, or you worry that you're being too direct, or maybe not direct enough. It's that feeling of, my English isn't professional enough.
That is the classic imposter syndrome of the language learner. It really is. And what we're here to discuss today, and what our own insights really highlight, is that this panic is, it's largely unnecessary. The problem is real. The feeling is absolutely valid. But the solution isn't what most people think it is.
And that is the big hook for today, isn't it? We're going to debunk the myth that business English is this giant separate mountain you have to climb from the very bottom.
Precisely. The thesis we're exploring today is that transitioning to business English isn't about learning a whole new language from zero. It's not about memorizing a dictionary full of corporate jargon.
Thank goodness.
It's about adjustment. It's about tweaking what you already have.
So our mission for this hour is pretty simple then. We're going to help you, the listener, adjust your language, your tone, and maybe most importantly, your mindset. We want to help you bridge that gap between casual fluency, which you already have, and professional command.
And just a quick tone check before we dive in. We know we're speaking to intermediate learners here, so we are going to keep our English clear. We're going to try to model exactly the kind of professional, articulate speech we're analyzing.
Right.
We'll speak clearly, not too fast, but we aren't going to, dumb it down either. This is for learners who are ready for that next step.
Perfect. So let's unpack this. Section 1. The mindset shift. The research we're looking at says the first step is realizing it's not a new language. But it really feels like one. Why is that?
It feels like a new language because the stakes are higher. That's the real difference. When you're chatting with a friend in a coffee shop and you make a little grammar mistake or you use the wrong word.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter at all. The goal is connection, friendship. But in business, the goal is often proving competence. So you feel judged. You feel like every word is being scrutinized.
That's so true. The pressure is completely different.
But here is the important truth. Business English is not fundamentally different from the English you already know. You have the grammar, you have a lot of the vocabulary, the foundation is there.
That is so reassuring to hear. So I don't need to go buy a Business English 101 textbook and start with, the cat is on the table all over again.
Absolutely not. Please don't do that. You have the foundation. What actually changes are 3 specific pillars, and it's helpful to think of them this way. First, how formal you sound. Second, how clearly you structure your ideas. And third, and this is probably the big one, how carefully you choose your words. Precision matters more.
Okay, so formality, structure, and precision. The notes we have describe the core difference as a vibe shift. I like that word. It says everyday English is often emotional, while business English is less emotional, more precise, and more polite.
That is the key distinction right there. Think about how we talk to our friends or family. We exaggerate. We use hyperbole. We say, oh my God, I hate this, or I absolutely love this, or this project is a total nightmare.
Yeah, I'm starving when you just had lunch 2 hours ago. Or that guy is a complete jerk. Very emotionally charged language.
Exactly. But in a workplace setting, that kind of raw emotion can signal a lack of control. It can seem unprofessional. Business English is designed, in many ways, to strip away that raw emotion and replace it with neutrality.
So it signals control and strategy.
That's a great way to put it. If you're emotional, you're reacting. If you're professional and calm, you are responding.
I love that distinction, reacting versus responding. So being less emotional isn't about being a robot with no personality.
Not at all.
It's about showing you are capable of handling the situation objectively without letting your personal feelings cloud your judgment.
Correct. It's about focusing on objective observation rather than subjective feeling. And that brings us perfectly to the mechanics of tone. Because it's easy for us to sit here and say, be more professional, but what does that actually sound like? How do you do that?
Yes, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Section 2, casual versus professional. The research compares the styles side by side. Casual is often fast, uses simple phrases, the structure is loose. Professional is all about clarity. Clarity is everything.
It is. And we have a great case study here, a comparison of two sentences. They mean the same thing factually, but they feel totally different.
Okay, let's hear them.
Yes, this example is a classic. Let's look at sentence A. Imagine you're in a meeting and you spot a potential mistake in a plan. Sentence A is, I think this might be a problem.
I think this might be a problem. Okay. Sounds pretty standard. I'd probably say that. It feels normal.
It does. It's not wrong. But now listen to sentence B. This could potentially cause an issue.
Ooh. Okay. This could potentially cause an issue. It sounds smoother. It sounds more adult somehow, more thoughtful.
Let's deeply analyze why that is, because the difference is subtle but so powerful. On the surface, they both convey the same fact. Something is wrong here.
Right.
But sentence A uses the word problem. In English, especially in a business setting, problem is a very heavy, very loaded word.
It feels negative.
It feels negative. It implies blame. It implies a roadblock. It just carries this negative emotional weight.
Yeah, problem feels like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're delivering bad news, and maybe it's someone's fault.
Exactly. Now look again at sentence B. It uses the word issue. In business, issue is much more neutral. An issue is just a topic to be discussed. It's something to be resolved. It feels objective.
So it puts the situation on the table for everyone to look at together, rather than throwing a problem at someone's feet.
That's a perfect way to describe it. And there's another subtle difference there, too, that you might have noticed. Sentence A started with, I think.
Right, I did notice that. Sentence B didn't.
That's a sharp observation. I think can sometimes, not always, but sometimes, sound a little uncertain, a little weak. By removing I think and starting with the object, this could potentially cause... You are removing your personal opinion from the equation and focusing on the objective fact.
And you're also using the word potentially.
Yes, another key softener.
So you're not saying it will destroy everything. You're saying it could potentially cause an issue. It sounds like you're looking ahead, you're analyzing, you're being strategic, not emotional.
Exactly. And that right there is the ingredients list for business English that our research identifies. There are 3 key things going on in that sentence.
Okay.
Softer language, like potentially. Indirect expressions, like phrasing it as a possibility, not a certainty. And this third concept, polite distance.
Polite distance. That's a really interesting phrase. I feel like some people might interpret distance as being cold or unfriendly. Like, I am the boss, stay away from me.
That is such a common misunderstanding, and it's a really important one to clarify. Polite distance does not mean being cold. You can be warm, you can be friendly, you can smile, and still maintain polite distance.
So what does it mean then?
It just means respecting professional boundaries. It means not being overly familiar too quickly. In language, it means using phrasing that sounds respectful of the other person's time, their position, and their intelligence.
So it's about respect. It's about creating a safe space for professional interaction where nobody feels attacked or judged or overly exposed.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this leads us right into the whole strategy of politeness, because this is where a lot of learners get really stuck. They have this fear. They think, if I am too polite, do I sound weak? Do I sound uncertain?
Oh, totally. I hear this all the time. There's this idea, maybe it comes from movies or TV shows about Wall Street or something, that to be businesslike, you have to be aggressive. You have to be like, do this, buy that, cut the deal. So if I come in and say, excuse me, could we please perhaps consider? People worry they sound soft.
That is such a dangerous myth. The reality, and all the research on modern management supports this, is that politeness is actually a sign of confidence and high emotional intelligence, or EQ. Aggression, more often than not, actually signals insecurity.
That's such a good point. If you have to shout to be heard, you probably aren't that confident in your authority or your ideas to begin with.
Exactly. A confident person doesn't need to force their ideas on others. They can present them in a way that invites agreement. Let's look at some of the key phrases that are suggested for this transition.
Okay.
Instead of saying something very direct like, we need to do this, the suggestion is to use phrases like, could we consider, or I would suggest, or my personal favorite, from my perspective.
Let's break this down. Could we consider? Why is that so much better than let's do this?
Could we consider invites collaboration. It turns a command into a question. It gives the other person in the room the chance to agree with you willingly rather than forcing them to submit to your idea.
It saves face.
It saves face for everyone. If you say, let's do X, and X turns out to be a terrible idea, you look a bit foolish. But if you say, could we consider X, and someone points out a flaw, you can just say, that's a good point, I hadn't thought of that, and you haven't lost any status. You look collaborative.
It leaves space for discussion. That's the key, isn't it? You aren't shutting the door on other ideas, you are opening it.
And I would suggest it is very similar. It's assertive. You are still giving a clear suggestion, but the word would softens it just enough to be polite. It implies, if it were up to me, this is the course of action I would take, but I respect that you have your own input.
And from my perspective, I love that one. It really owns the opinion without stating it as an absolute, undeniable fact.
Correct. It explicitly acknowledges that there are other perspectives in the room. This is so crucial for international teams. I mean, we have listeners from all over the world.
Absolutely.
And cultural nuances about directness are huge. In some cultures, a direct disagreement is considered extremely rude. In others, it's just normal debate. By using these softeners, you create a kind of neutral middle ground that works for everyone, regardless of their cultural background.
So we're really redefining strength here. Strong communication isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It is rarely aggressive. It's calm, it's clear, and it's strategic.
Strategic is the perfect word. You are using language as a tool to achieve a goal. And that goal is usually cooperation or agreement or action without creating unnecessary conflicts or making enemies along the way.
Now, speaking of places where it is very easy to make enemies, let's talk about email. Section 4. The written challenge. The notes call email the biggest challenge for learners. Why is email so much scarier than just chatting with someone in the hallway?
Because it's permanent and because it is completely stripped of all the human cues we rely on to understand meaning.
Right.
When I'm talking to you right now, I can see your face. If I say something and you get a confused look, I can immediately stop and clarify. I can smile to show I'm joking, or use my tone of voice to show I'm being serious.
Right. But in an email, nobody can hear you smile.
Exactly. And you can't see if the person reading it is having a bad day and is maybe interpreting your words in the most negative way possible. You just send the email out into the void and it sits there. It can be reread, it can be forwarded, it can be analyzed to death. That pressure makes learners freeze up.
So what's the magic formula? What is the trifecta? What are the three things that make a good business email?
The notes boil it down to three things: clear, structured, and polite but direct.
Okay. Clear, structured, polite, but direct. Let's start with structured. I feel like this is where people really mess up. They just write these giant, intimidating walls of text.
The wall of text is the absolute enemy of effective business communication. You have to remember, the person reading your email is busy. They're probably skimming it on their phone while in another meeting.
Guilty.
We all are. If they open an email and just see a solid block of black text, their brain just shuts down. They'll either ignore it or miss the key information.
So visual clarity is actually part of the language skill here.
It is absolutely part of the skill. Breaking your text into short paragraphs, 2 to 3 sentences max, is non-negotiable. Use bullet points, use numbered lists, use white space. It's a sign of respect for the reader's time and their cognitive load. You're making it easy for them to understand you.
Okay, that's a great practical tip. And what about the polite but direct part? Let's get into the do's and don'ts.
The do's are simple but so vital. You must always use greetings and closings. Hi name, dear name, and then at the end, best regards. Sincerely, thank you. Never ever skip these, even if you're in a hurry.
Why is that so important?
Because it's the digital equivalent of saying hello and goodbye in person, skipping them feels like walking into someone's office, shouting a request at them, and then walking out without another word.
It's just rude. And the don'ts, I have a feeling I know what's coming.
No slang. And no emojis, at least not until you know the person and the company culture very, very well. And even then, you have to be careful.
Yeah, an emoji can be misinterpreted so easily.
It really can. And slang, it just undermines your professionalism. If you write gonna or wanna or BD in a business email to a client, you immediately lower your perceived status and credibility. Keep it clean.
Now, here's my favorite point from this whole section. It's about vocabulary versus purpose. I feel like when people get nervous about sounding professional, they swallow a thesaurus.
Oh, the big word trap. It is so common and so counterproductive.
They try to use the biggest, most complicated words they can find to prove that they're smart, to prove their English is good.
Right. You see people writing utilize instead of the perfectly good word use, or commence instead of start, or the aforementioned document instead of just this document. They think it sounds sophisticated.
But it actually just sounds clunky.
Yeah.
And a bit pretentious.
It sounds insecure. It sounds like you're trying too hard. And worse, much worse, it often obscures the meaning. If I have to read your sentence 3 times to figure out what you're trying to say because you used a bunch of complicated vocabulary, you have failed at communication.
So the goal isn't to sound smart.
The goal is to be understood. You don't need complicated vocabulary. You need a clear purpose. The most powerful business leaders, the best communicators, they often use the simplest language because they are confident enough to be clear.
That is such a relief to hear. You don't need to be Shakespeare. You just need to be clear. Okay, so let's move from the written word back to the spoken word. Section 5, spoken dynamics meetings and presentations.
Yes, the real-time arena. This is where the panic really sets in because you can't press backspace and edit yourself.
The outline mentions some really specific mechanics here. Turn-taking, summarizing, and agreeing or disagreeing politely. Let's talk about turn-taking. This is hard even for native speakers sometimes, just knowing when to jump in.
It is incredibly difficult. And for a language learner, there's that extra processing lag. You hear something, you translate it in your head, you formulate your response, you translate it back into English, and by the time you're ready to speak,
the conversation has moved on. You have the perfect, brilliant point to make, you're building up the courage, and then poof, too late, the topic has changed.
So one of the hard skills we really need to discuss is interrupting respectfully. It sounds like a contradiction in terms, but in a fast-paced meeting, it's a necessary skill. You have to learn the phrases that act like a gentle wedge to open the door for you to speak.
Right, what? What are the magic spells for this? Give us the phrases.
Okay, so phrases like, sorry to interrupt, but I'd just like to add, or if I could just jump in here for a moment, or a really good one is to link to what the other person said. That's a great point, and just to build on that.
It's about the tone, too, right? You can't just shout, wait.
No, absolutely not. You have to use your voice to signal you are entering the stream of conversation, not trying to dam the river. You keep your volume controlled. You can lean forward slightly, maybe use a small hand gesture. And once you have the floor, you speak clearly and concisely.
Okay, that's great. And what about summarizing? The notes say summarizing is a key skill. Why is that so important?
Summarizing is a secret superpower for ESL learners in meetings. There are 2 big reasons. 1, it shows everyone in the room that you are listening actively and that you understand.
Right.
If you say, so, just to clarify what I'm hearing, we are deciding to go with option B primarily because of the budget constraints. Everyone in the room nods and thinks, wow, they are really on the ball. They're paying attention.
Okay, and what's reason number 2?
Reason 2 is much more practical and, well, a bit selfish. It buys you time. It confirms you understood everything correctly before you give your own opinion. If you misunderstood, they'll correct you. And you've just saved yourself from making a comment that's completely off topic. It's a safety net.
That is brilliant. It's like a little checkpoint before you commit. Asking for clarification is another one on the list. Never pretend to understand.
Never. That is the golden rule of business communication for any language learner. Nodding and smiling when you have absolutely no idea what is happening is a ticking time bomb.
It really is.
It's far more professional and respectable to say, I'm sorry, could you clarify what you mean by synergy in this context, than to guess and get it completely wrong later on. Asking for clarification shows you care about getting the details right. It's a sign of diligence, not weakness.
Now, presentations. Public speaking is scary enough in your own language. In a second language could be absolutely terrifying. But the advice here is so liberating. The goal is not to sound advanced. The goal is to be easy to follow.
Yes. This is another mindset shift. We need to change the metric of success. A successful presentation isn't one where you use perfect grammar and 5 complex idioms. A successful presentation is one where the audience understood your main point and knows what to do next.
So simple structure is better than complex grammar.
Infinitely better. Signposting is your best friend. Use phrases like, first we will talk about A, then we will look at B, and finally I'll conclude with C.
Guiding them.
You're guiding them by the hand. Moving on to my next point. As you can see on this slide, to summarize, if your structure is solid and clear, your grammar can be a little imperfect, and they will still walk away thinking you are a fantastic presenter. Clarity trumps complexity every single time.
That leads us to a massive psychological hurdle. Section 6, the native speaker trap.
This is, for many people, the biggest mental block of all. So many learners have this idea in their head that says, I will only be good at business English when I sound exactly like I was born in London or Chicago.
Right. They want the perfect accent. They want the speed. They want to be able to use all the slang and idioms flawlessly.
And our research, our experience, it all calls this idea unnecessary and unrealistic.
Unrealistic, I get. It's incredibly hard to lose your accent. But unnecessary. Don't companies want to hire people who sound like native speakers?
Some might think they do, but let's look at the reality of global business in the 21st century. Look at the list of regions where international business English is used every single day. Europe, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, South America. Who are you actually talking to in these meetings?
Well, you're probably talking to other non-native speakers. A German project manager talking to a Brazilian developer. A Japanese engineer talking to a French client.
Exactly. The vast majority of business interactions in English today are non-native to non-native. In that context, a thick native accent, heavy use of confusing idioms like, we need to hit the ground running, or give me a ballpark figure, and speaking really fast, that's actually bad communication.
That is so true. I have been in international meetings where the native English speaker is the only one nobody really understands because they're mumbling, using slang, and the non-native speakers are communicating perfectly with each other because they are all using a standard, clear version of English.
Clarity matters infinitely more than accent. Simple, correct, clearly pronounced English is far more effective than fast, complex, idiomatic speech. There's even a concept called international English, or Globish, which is basically this simplified, standardized version of English. That is the real language of global business.
So if you're listening to this and you have an accent from your home country, keep it.
Your accent is part of your identity. As long as your pronunciation is clear enough to be easily understood, your accent is perfectly fine. Do not waste years of energy trying to erase it. Spend that energy on improving your structure, your vocabulary choice, and your clarity.
The ultimate goal, as the notes so perfectly state, is not to impress. It is to be understood and trusted. And trust comes from clarity, not from knowing what it's raining cats and dogs means.
Exactly. Trust comes from reliability and predictability. If I always understand what you're saying, I can trust you. If I'm constantly confused by your fancy language or fast speech, I start to get suspicious. I can't rely on you.
Okay, so we've covered the mindset, the tone, the emails, the meetings, and we have officially busted the native speaker myth. Now, the listener's probably thinking, okay, this is all great, but what do I do today? How do I start? Let's get into section 7, how to start the transition.
Right. We need actionable steps. You can't just decide to be better. You have to practice. The expert advice suggests a really practical 2-pronged approach: input and mental exercise.
Let's start with input. The first tip is listen to business podcasts or meetings.
You need to fill your ears with the rhythm and vocabulary of professional speech. Listen to business news on the BBC or NPR. Listen to TED Talks on leadership or innovation. But don't just listen passively for the content. Listen actively for the structure.
What do you mean by that?
Listen for how they transition between points. How do they politely disagree with an idea? How do they open the topic? Pay attention to the specific phrases they use over and over again.
The next point is to treat professional emails and reports as study material. That's interesting. So when I get a long, boring report at work, I should actually study the language in it.
Yes. Stop reading it just for the data. Start reading it like a language detective. Ask yourself, why did they choose this specific word? Oh, look at that sentence structure. That's a very polite way of saying something negative. Steal their phrases.
Steal them.
Absolutely. If you see a great opening line in an email from a senior colleague, write it down in a notebook. Use it yourself next week. That's how we learn language, by copying what we hear and see.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about the second prong, the mental exercise? The notes say, practice reformulating casual sentences into professional ones.
This is my favorite tip because you can do it anywhere, anytime. On your commute, while you're washing dishes, in the shower. Take a normal, casual thought that you have in your head. For example, I really don't want to go to that meeting. It's a total waste of time.
Okay, I have that thought a lot.
We all do. Now, your exercise is to translate that casual emotional thought into professional business English just inside your head.
Ooh, okay, let me try. So the thought is, I don't want to do that meeting. It's a waste of time. How about, I'm concerned about our team's bandwidth. Could we perhaps evaluate if this meeting is the most effective use of our resources at this moment?
Brilliant. That's absolutely perfect. Do you see what you just did? You turned a negative complaint into a strategic resource allocation concern. You sound like a leader.
That's actually fun. It's like a little brain puzzle.
It is. And the more you do it in your head as a low-stakes exercise, the faster and more automatically you'll be able to do it in a real meeting when the pressure is on. It's building the muscle.
But there is one final component here, isn't there? The courage component.
This is it. This is the most important tip of all. All the practice in the world means nothing if you don't apply it. You have to use English at work, even when it feels uncomfortable and scary. You have to speak up in that meeting. You have to send that email.
That's the hard part, though. It's so much easier and safer just to stay quiet.
It is safer to stay quiet, but you will never grow that way. Your professional confidence only grows with use, not with perfection. You have to do it to get better at it. You have to be willing to be imperfect in public.
And honestly, I think it's important to remember that most people are not judging you as harshly as you are judging yourself. They just want to know what you think. They want your expertise.
That's the key.
They hired you for your skills as an engineer or a marketer or a designer, not just for your perfect grammar.
Exactly. Your professional value is your knowledge and your ideas. English is just the tool you use to deliver that value. Don't let your fear of the tool get in the way of delivering your value.
Wow. We have covered so much ground today. This has been incredibly helpful. Let's wrap this up with a summary in our outro.
Let's do it. So to recap for everyone listening, transitioning to business English is not about becoming a different person. It is not about putting on a fake professional mask or acting like someone you're not.
It's about adjustment. It's about taking the English you already know, the English you use to order pizza and watch movies, and just using it more carefully and more strategically.
It's about that shift from raw emotion to considered neutrality. It's about changing your problems into issues. It's about moving from a simple, I think, to a more collaborative, from my perspective.
And please remember that final affirmation from our notes because it's so important. You already speak English. Now you're just learning how to use it professionally. You already have all the bricks. You're just learning how to build a different kind of house with them.
That is a perfect analogy.
Now, before we go, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over. We've talked all this time about how business English is neutral, calm, objective. We talked about polite distance and using language to reduce conflict. Well, here's something to think about. If these techniques work so well to de-escalate tension and improve communication in the boardroom, how might using a business English approach actually improve your communication in your personal life?
Oh, that's a very interesting question.
Think about it. The next time you're in a heated argument with your partner or a friend, instead of saying, "You never listen to me, this is a disaster," what if you tried the business English approach?
Chuckles. So something like, from my perspective, I feel that there has been a breakdown in our communication process that could potentially cause an issue in our relationship. Could we perhaps consider a different approach to active listening?
It might sound a little funny at first, I'll give you that, but hey, it definitely lowers the emotional temperature. It removes the blame. It focuses on the process, not the person. Maybe we could all be a little more corporate in our living room sometimes.
It is certainly worth a try. Emotional intelligence is a transferable skill. It works everywhere.
Thank you so much for listening to ESL Listening Practice. We truly hope this conversation about business English has given you the tools, and maybe more importantly, the confidence to walk into that office or log on to that Zoom call and own your professional voice.
Good luck with your transition. You've got this.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.